Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm delighted to have you here. It's such a privilege that you are willing to spend your time with me, and I hope to add a ton of value. I want to just start by telling you about my experience this last week. We wrapped up our 12th week together with our coaching cohort. And we've taken about 200 people through our coaching courses over the last few years. And the results and the transformations that people get are just absolutely profound and so inspiring. And they're the reason I get out of bed in the morning. Excuse me if I get emotional because I love what I do. I feel so grateful for Dr. Bredesen and everything that he's done to pave the way so that I can live my purpose. I am showing up here selfishly because I get to come to work and I hear people tell me things like, over the past year, my MOCA has moved from 21 to 26. I now exercise nearly every day. I'm in ketosis more often than not, and many other health markers have also improved, plus my health issues. I no longer have long COVID. My joint pain is gone. I've stopped itching. I've stopped having the weird dry heaving spasm and finally settled on a steady weight. I was worried I was going to lose too much. This came from Jan, who's joined us for several of our coaching sessions over the past year. And she has transformed not only her life, but also that of her loved ones around her and her household. And from Sean, he said, this program has been extremely helpful. I've been in ketosis and dropped about 24 pounds intentionally. I've increased my exercise and just played golf today. And now I walk the course. The day before, I walked 4.5 miles. My life has transformed and I have improvement in my short-term memory. I think this program is phenomenal. That happened in just the last 12 weeks. Just since the start of the year, Sean has had these improvements. And a lot of them we owe to the ketogenic diet. Now, not all of it. This program, Dr. Bredesen's approach, what we do here at Solsere and at Marama, and in our coaching programs is more than just the ketogenic diet. But the reason I want to start tonight with the ketogenic diet and this 4 webinar series is because I feel like the diet does a ton of the heavy lifting. When we do these coaching courses, a lot of people wonder, like, where do I start? There's so much to this, the exercise and the cognitive exercises, the physical exercises, plus the cognitive exercises, plus community, plus supplements, plus testing. Where do I start? It can feel overwhelming. You're not alone in that feeling of overwhelm. And that's a lot of what I want to help with tonight and what we do in the coaching is how do we create a doable plan? I point people in 2 directions. One, what's easy? So if you already have learned a little bit about keto, maybe you've been in ketosis before, but you need a little extra motivation to go back to it. Or maybe you've already kind of started to cut out carbs, but you haven't fully got rid of processed foods. Maybe going towards ketosis is going to be easy for you. That might be part of why you're here, to just get that extra nudge. The other place that we recommend that people start is what's going to make the biggest difference. And I think often going into ketosis, a healthy keto, going into ketosis can make a huge difference. I'm going to share some stories with you tonight, not just Sean's, not just Jan's, but others where people have gotten into ketosis and experienced this transformation. I recommend making this part of a comprehensive program, but it's a wonderful place to start because many people report sleeping better, having better energy, having better mood. In fact, there was a study that came out just this week that showed that there was a positive impact on getting into ketosis for people with mental illness. Also, it reduced pain in a recent study. So we see that there's benefits outside of just increased cognitive function, but things that can impact cognitive function, like mental illness and like pain, can be reduced as well. So you can have more energy, you can have more capacity to take on things like cognitive exercises and hobbies and socializing and physical exercise that is also going to help your brain. So I hope that makes sense for why we're getting started here. I want to share with you the results of the clinical trial and some of what we learned from the clinical trial that we did in our office here at Solsere and published in 2023. Sorry, I'm going to be sharing my screen and so going back and forth a little bit here. So hopefully this advances and looks good on your end. So our study was done here at Solseri, and we had 23 participants who we took through a 6-month intervention. They all had measurable cognitive impairment. So we only recruited participants who had MoCA scores between 12 and 23. The MoCA score is the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, and a perfect score is 30. It's a one-page worksheet that I'm sure many of you have seen, where you draw a clock, copy a cube, name some zoo animals, and tell whoever's administering the test where you are and what day, what year it is. And so on this test, we only recruited people who had imperfect scores, who had scores showing us that they had at least mild cognitive impairment and in some cases diagnosed Alzheimer's. And what we saw is that over 6 months, 17 out of 23 of these participants improved. That's 74% of them. So more often than not, we had patients improving. And we published this in the peer-reviewed journal, the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease, in August of 2023, and we're happy to share that study. Now, not all of our participants who improved got fully into ketosis, but they all went in that direction. Everybody changed their diet at some level, even if it meant just cutting back on carbohydrates, increasing leafy greens, maybe it meant getting rid of processed foods, and many of them did successfully get into ketosis. And what we saw anecdotally from that trial, although we didn't run the numbers on this, the people who got kind of those higher ketone levels had even more improvement in their MoCA scores. So this was a really exciting trial. Now, I'm not the only doctor who's published this. Kat Toops and Dr. Bredesen, his colleagues, there was another trial that was published a year earlier, also in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease, that had very similar results. They had recruited patients, 25 patients, who had MoCA scores of 19 and above. So they were less cognitively declined, and they had a 9-month intervention, but 84% of them improved. This is so exciting and better than any drug on the market. And Red, I want to share with you tonight, is one of those pieces that helps people get there. So if you're wondering, well, what are the other pieces? I want to share a little bit about what an overall foundations of brain health looks like, and let you know that there is additional support for getting you these other pieces, right? So we're going to talk about keto tonight. When we come back next week, we're going to talk about activities. We're going to talk about movement and exercise, and we're going to talk about caring for each other, connecting over this 4-part webinar series. So don't worry, we're going to get into more of this, and there's lots of coaching support. But I want to kind of put the keto puzzle piece into the bigger picture so that you get that it's not about one thing. What we're doing here and what we did in these trials, both the Bredesen trial that Kat Toops published and also the one that we did here, it was a multimodal intervention. It's not about one thing. Dementia and Alzheimer's, these are complex decline. This is complex degenerative disease. This is complex illness, and it requires a complex intervention. And oftentimes precision-based interventions that are really related to why you or your loved one is experiencing this neurodegeneration. We want to understand the why. Now, that being said, there's so much we can do with these foundations for brain health. The trajectory of our health over time is so dependent on those little decisions that we make every day, what we decide to put in our mouths, how much we decide to move, what time we end up going to bed, and how we manage our stressors. These things have a huge impact on how well we age. And so today is the day to start making better decisions so that you can age well and keep your cognitive sharpness. All right, so I want to next get into keto. How do we do this? I know so many of you have questions, and over the years, I have had patients who have they have seen just dramatic results in a matter of a week. And so what are they doing? What exactly is it that we want to do there? And there's lots of support. We have a keto diet guide. Hopefully you've already got that. And Tyler is here supporting me, and she can put that in the chat, but we're going through the basics. Let's get to what exactly is happening in ketosis. We are shifting our metabolism from burning sugar, into burning fat. So we want to be burning fat for fuel, turning that into ATP, or the fuel that our cells run on. This burns cleaner. It doesn't create as much oxidative stress as burning sugar for fuel. And burning fat is actually preferred by the brain in very rare instances in research settings when both sugar or glucose or carbohydrates, those can be used interchangeably, sugar, carbohydrates, glucose, that can be burned for fuel. But when ketones are also present in the brain prefers to burn ketones. As I mentioned, it burns a little bit cleaner. And as we age, regardless of our diabetes status, so even if you have a perfect hemoglobin A1C, a great fasting blood sugar, you can still have a reduction in your sensitivity to insulin and your ability to turn glucose into ATP in the brain. And so our bodies are just these divinely designed, amazing machines that can go back and forth. They're like hybrid engines. We can go back and forth between burning sugar for fuel, sugar, glucose, or carbohydrates, and burning fat for fuel in the brain as ketones. And so what we want to do is take advantage of that and go back and forth. Now, I don't think that anyone should be in ketosis forever. That's a really common question that comes up. Are you saying that we should be on keto forever? No. What we want is the metabolic flexibility of going back and forth. We want to increase the nutrients and the fats in the brain. So we want a nutrient-rich diet. We want leafy greens, dense nutrients in our foods that we choose. And that way we're going to get the nutrients that we need to heal, plus the energy that's necessary to get up and over maybe some inflammation or some sort of infection, whatever, maybe some infections or toxins. This all requires nutrients and energy in order to resolve. So we want to make sure that our brain has that energy. And one of the ways to do that is with ketones. Now, you have some options with the ketogenic diet. If you're not quite ready to fully commit, although I recommend that you do, you can add exogenous ketones, and that can sometimes help us to get at least into mild ketosis. So as you start cutting back carbohydrates, examples of carbohydrates, of course, bread, pasta, cereals, any grains typically will increase our blood sugar level, but as can fruits and starchy veggies like squash. So it's not just about cutting out our classic carbohydrates or our sugar. It's not just about cutting out cakes and cookies. It's really about restricting carbohydrates so that we can get our ketones up. But one way to do that in kind of a sneaky way is to add some exogenous ketones. And in our keto diet guide, we have a list of things that you might want to consider getting. But one thing that makes it a lot easier to get into ketosis is to measure it. And so when we think about what the goal is, of course, is for you to live a long, healthy life with full cognitive capacity. But when we're getting into ketosis, when we measure, we want to see where our ketone levels are. And you're essentially not quite there yet, probably consuming too many carbohydrates, or you don't have enough ketones if you're under 0.5. And I recommend the Keto Mojo. This is the device that we use. That's a picture of it here on the screen, and I've got one here in my hand. The Keto Mojo is a really helpful device that helps us understand, are we on target or not? So mild ketosis is also winning. This is a great place to be, especially if you want to be in ketosis longer term. You can be in this 0.5 to 0.9 millimoles per liter. And that is a great place where many people experience some weight loss, hopefully not too much. We're going to talk about that. But they're getting that cognitive benefit. They're feeling sharper. They're maybe sleeping better. They're feeling the benefits of being in ketosis. When we get to the target, which is 1.0 to 3 millimoles per liter, that's when people really notice that MOCA score is going up, they're cognitively sharper, they're remembering their grandchildren's names, they're feeling like they can have complete conversations without losing their train of thought. They're not forgetting where they put things or putting keys in the refrigerator or making silly mistakes like that. So this can be a wonderful goal to achieve, and it feels good. So I am currently in ketosis. I go in and out of ketosis myself. And what I recommend for people in my position, I'm in my 40s, looking to prevent cognitive decline as I age. And I'm in ketosis 3 or 4 times a year for 4 to 6 weeks. For someone who's already experiencing cognitive decline, I recommend going into ketosis more often than you're not. So maybe considering 2 weeks out of the month or a little bit more than that. At Marama, what we do is we have people who've been there for a long time where we want them to go in and out of ketosis. They're in ketosis Monday through Thursday, and then we'll add seasonal fruits and starchy veggies on the weekend. If you are traveling, being in ketosis forever, I think is impossible for most of us. We travel, we have weddings and birthdays and celebrations and holidays and things to look forward to. And we don't want to feel super restricted. We want to be able to eat out and enjoy each other, enjoy company socially, and not feel like we can't eat the things on the menu. And so you're going to fall out of ketosis, and that's okay. Really, it's about getting back into it when you come back. And for people who are struggling with cognitive decline, initially, I love to see you get into ketosis for 3 to 6 months, and then go back and forth with maybe playing with a plant-based diet, a vegan type diet, or more of a vegetarian diet, but increasing those seasonal fruits and starchy veggies to make sure it's a nutrient dense diet. This is not a bacon and cheese diet ever. This is about getting in those super nutrient dense foods like your plants, your leafy greens, your non-starchy veggies, protein, good high quality anti-inflammatory protein. Eggs are a great food, and some dairy. I know that I saw a question already, a great question in the Q&A about dairy. And I differ from Dr. Bredesen and his team a little bit here, because one of the things that we are often concerned about as we're thinking about the ketogenic diet is, are we going to gain weight or lose weight? So the issues that I see come up, especially with women, postmenopausal women, we are concerned about frailty. And often dairy, including dairy in a ketogenic diet, not, we don't want it to be an all cheese diet, but having some dairy can be very satisfying. It's high in fat, high in protein, and it's easy. So it can be something that can prevent us from losing too much weight. Many people think back to that food pyramid from the 1990s, where it said that fat was bad, right? Fat was very much vilified, and the whole grains were promoted as something we should eat 8 and 10 and 12 servings of a day. And we know that this was really backwards. We really want fat, but it's sometimes hard for me to convince people that fat is good for you. It depends on what type of fat, however. So we want to make sure we're focused on those good, high quality fats like olive oil, avocado, coconut. I am a fan of butter, ghee, and then some high quality dairy. And you choosing chicken thighs, right, that have maybe skin on them, having more fat versus the chicken breast that has less. So we can choose some of the more good fats to increase in our diet so that we get those anti-inflammatory benefits, particularly wild-caught salmon, sardines, anchovies, the smash fish that are low in mercury, but cold water fish that are high in those omega-3s that help to reduce inflammation and help with brain health. The other issue, so usually it's the ladies who are concerned about having too much fat, and I'm worried about them losing too much weight. So we want to maintain a healthy weight, not go in the direction of frailty, and we want to make sure they're getting plenty of calories on a ketogenic diet. So hopefully adding some dairy, adding some exogenous ketones, going back and forth in and out of ketosis where we're adding more carbs sometimes to maintain weight. There's lots of strategies that we can use, and Tyler's a phenomenal coach, and she can help if we need to individualize that. The other issue that we see is when people get into ketosis, they should be losing weight. And sometimes I have people say, no, I'm actually gaining weight. Typically what's happening is that we've raised our fats, but we haven't reduced our carbohydrates enough to fully kick into ketosis where we're burning fat for fuel. Often weight loss, and pretty rapid weight loss of a pound or 2 per week, happens quickly once we get into ketosis. So if we're not experiencing that, we want to make sure that we adjust and probably back down on our carbohydrates. So a few things to kind of keep in mind as we consider some of the concerns, some of the issues that can come up as we get into ketosis. So again, what is the goal? The goal here is to experience a life of optimal health where you are able to engage and able to enjoy socializing and able to exercise, feel like you got energy. These are the things that we want generally, and that's part of a much bigger puzzle. But getting into ketosis can be a great first step because it gives us that big impact. It really makes a big difference, particularly if you're starting with a standard American diet. Now, I know many of you who are here are not starting with a standard American diet. You're here because you're well educated and you've done a lot of research already, and you're probably already getting into a diet that's somewhat similar to this. Or maybe you've tried other diets, maybe tried going vegan or paleo, something where you've changed your diet significantly to reduce inflammation and improve your health. So hopefully you're already on the path and we're just fine tuning and maybe troubleshooting a bit. So please let us know what your questions are. I'm really excited to answer them. And I want to share a little bit about what we see at Marama and how we make this happen, because many people feel kind of overwhelmed. What am I going to eat if I can't eat the carbohydrates that I'm used to? What does a meal plan look like, right? And so I want to share how we have created the menu we've created at Marama. And please feel free to take out your cameras. This is recorded and the webinar will be available, as will the slides. But if you want to take out your camera real quick, there's going to be a bunch of words here. But this is a great kind of starting place to know, to get your brain spinning around what you can eat on a ketogenic diet. So this is 12 days of what we eat at Marama. This past weekend, the chef from Marama came over to my house and cooked for some of the earliest supporters of Marama. When we first got started, these were the guys that helped me with everything, with getting all the junk out of there and making sure the house was good and decorating it. And it was so nice to kind of celebrate with them and have Gil, our chef, come over and cook. And he had actually talked to the residents at Marama and had them pick their favorites. And some of them are on here. What he cooked was this herb chicken that was absolutely delicious. And he also had this avocado. It was a cauliflower avocado ice cream, believe it or not, and it was delicious. It sounds so weird, but these meals are so, so, so good. So hopefully you've taken a quick picture of that. The chia pudding, absolutely delicious. The oatmeal, the keto oatmeal, is one of my favorites. I made it last week when I was getting into ketosis. And what I do is make a big pot of it on Monday, and then I have it throughout the week. I just heat it back up with some extra coconut milk. And it's absolutely delicious. So you don't have to worry about feeling deprived. You don't need to worry that you're going to get bored. There's a ton to work with. And it also doesn't need to be complicated. In the book, so I think many of you know that my book will be out in June. We'd be very grateful if you order a copy. If you order a hard copy, it'll count towards the bestseller list, which we are hoping to hit, so that it builds the momentum and increases the impact of the work in the book. And in the book, there are 15 recipes and a month-long meal plan. So there's a lot of great ideas, and they're yummy recipes that I have made myself. I've made every single one of them. They're some of the favorites from Marama. So people love them. It's not hard. And I know there's many of you out there are vegetarian or vegan. I do not recommend a vegan keto diet. And although I've seen a couple people do it really well, it takes a ton of effort. It takes a lot of time to be healthy and be vegan and keto. So I don't recommend doing it for more than a couple of weeks because it restricts so many foods. It's easy to become nutrient depleted. So I recommend vegan on its own, not keto. So you can go vegan if you're not in ketosis, because then you can have those starchy veggies and you can have more variety. Now, vegetarian and keto is actually quite doable. It depends a lot on eggs. And if you're pescatarian, that's even better if you can add that salmon, the good wild caught salmon and those omegas. If you like anchovies and sardines, I know they're not for everybody. But if you can add those, that gives you even more variety and those great nutrients as well. But you can do keto vegetarian. There's a great book by Dr. Will Cole called Ketotarian, and it's one of my favorite keto cookbooks. And it is a vegetarian keto cookbook. Another really great keto cookbook that I love is by Molly Devine, and it's the Mediterranean Keto Cookbook. And both of those are fantastic. I see a quick question popping up, and I just want to answer it because it's so important. Tuna. So thanks, Natalie, for asking. Tuna tends to be high in mercury, and mercury is directly neurotoxic. So I don't tend to recommend tuna. Swordfish is very high in mercury. I had a patient just recently who was eating swordfish about once a week, and her mercury levels were at 26. We want that mercury level close to 0, and around 1 is the CDC average. She was 26 times that CDC average just from eating swordfish once a week. The way that we test, we can tell if it's where it's coming from, and hers was absolutely coming from eating swordfish. So that was wild for me to see. I was like reminded of how impactful eating high mercury fish can be on our system. So I do recommend avoiding, especially swordfish, especially the bigger fish, but also the tuna if you have any issues with cognitive decline or you're worried about that, you just don't want to be exposed to mercury. It's too toxic for the brain. So I want to share kind of in the context of how do the meals fit into our day-to-day life. So at Marama, the entire day is set up with brain health in mind. And for many of you at home, you may be in a position where that's what your loved one needs. You need an entire day set up to support cognitive function. For some of us, we're working and that's not going to work. But for those of you who want to set up something like what we do at Marama at home, this just gives you kind of a structure for how these meals fit into the day. So if you're worried about losing weight, I do not recommend intermittent fasting. I recommend having 3 solid meals a day and 2 snacks, and that's how we do it at Marama. So there's an organic ketogenic an organic ketogenic breakfast at 8, a snack at 10:30, lunch at noon, another snack at 2:30, and dinner at 5. Now we want to make sure that we have a 3-hour gap between our last meal, that last bite of food, and when we go to sleep. This allows us to get better sleep, more quality sleep, more deep sleep, so that we can feel more rested in the morning. Then we offer herbal teas because sometimes people are used to or have a habit of like munching on popcorn or on something crunchy or salty or sweet while they're kind of zoning out and watching TV. So the invitation is to engage in games or read a book or watch a musical maybe, instead of kind of checking out after dinner. And that's what we do at Marama. And then have an herbal tea if you're looking for if you have an oral fixation and you need to, if you have a habit of putting something in your mouth in the evenings. That's a great way to break it, is by doing a tea, replacing it with something else. So in between our meals, we engage in things that are good for the brain. We know that walking at least 10,000 steps, right around 10,000 steps a day, it reduces your risk of dementia by about half. There was a recent study that came out of the UK last year that showed that it was like 9,800 something steps cut that dementia risk in half. Now, if you're already struggling with cognitive decline, walking isn't enough. So we add meditation. We add brain engaging activities. We go through the daily chronicles and we talk about what happened on April 24th of 1965. And sometimes it'll be someone's wedding anniversary or a birthday or a special day for them. And it helps us to share and join in that community. We also engage in creative activities. It might be flower arranging or sculpting or painting or gardening. And we do that before and after lunch at Marama. And then in the afternoon, I mentioned that walking isn't enough. So we go into the therapy circuit in the brain gym where we have a rebounder, a mini trampoline. We've got exercising with oxygen on a bike or a rower. We have a sauna where we can get some of the toxins out. So we have more vigorous exercise that we get into in the afternoon every day. So this is how you can imagine starting to create a brain healthy lifestyle. And the goal is not for you to necessarily feel like you need to do this at home, but it gives you an idea of what might you be able to add a little bit of. Is it just going to be the diet, or could you add some kind of prayer or meditation practice daily? Some more vigorous exercise? Is there something that you can do on a regular basis that would tip the scales in favor of brain health? So I want to share a little bit about how we help people. I mentioned that even just this week, we had these really incredible testimonials of people who felt so much better. And the reason that I mean, this is the reason I do this work, and also the reason that we wrote this book. We have been doing the coaching courses, and I was hearing these incredible things about how Courtney, for instance, this week said, I walk a mile a day now. I was barely walking 10 steps at a time before this program, and my issues of balance are now fully corrected. This program has benefited me so much, and I thank you all for all of your participation, all of the other people in the group. She's learned so much, not just from me, but from them. And what we've seen is that the community is incredible. And there's so much that you could do at home on your own. I want everyone to know that there's a way to get into this and get benefit, whether you need a lot of support or you feel like you can do it on your own. What I am trying to do is just create something that works for everyone so that anyone can get started and get the benefits of Dr. Bredesen's work. And when we did the coaching program, Tyler and I have learned so much over the last few years that what we basically did was all of the learnings from that I've put into this book. And so the book will be out June 11th. And again, we are so grateful if you want to purchase one. And of course, when you join the coaching program, you will get one. We will send you one. But the idea is that don't wait. What we've seen over and over again is that the sooner you get started, the better results we see. In my clinical practice, I can say that when people wait to get help, the more advanced they are in the disease progression and the older they are, the harder it is and the less confidence I have. The most confidence I have is when we can prevent, or when there's those early signs, when we can start making these big moves in diet and exercise and stress management and sleep, getting our sleep apnea treated, getting all of the pieces in place so that we can optimize cognitive function. So what I want to share about our coaching program is going to start May 20th. And we are super excited to start another cohort. We invite people from previous cohorts to join us, and they are so inspiring because they are a few steps ahead. So they've already seen some of the results, they've already experienced some of the transformation, and they're back to get more and to add more layers of icing on the cake, if you will, the keto cake. And what we get there in the coaching program is accountability. So there's a course, there's a private group, and there's a live coaching program for 12 weeks with me. And there's accountability, there's accessibility. Many people say, I keep showing up because I get answers to my questions in real time. So the questions that come up through the week, they keep them in a list and then they ask them. And the first thing that I do when we start these courses, when we start each week, is I go to those questions that have come through. So if you're having trouble getting into ketosis, or if you don't know which air filter is the best one to get, or if you don't know, how to get the lab testing done, or how to get somebody to help you interpret it, or if you had some issue come up with a supplement, I'm there to answer your questions. We've heard so many of these things over the years, and the other people in the group, many of them have experienced it. So often someone will ask the question that you didn't know you had, and also you're going to get answers from more than just me, but from other people who are on the same journey. We've had people share about resources around getting great help and getting help paid for. If you need a caregiver to come into your house, getting that paid for, and different strategies, whether it's legal or financial, or of course, health-wise, but all of the other complexities that come up as we face dementia. Many of these things are discussed in our groups, and this can be a source of certainly of community, but of support and inspiration. And it's so, I love hearing that people have stayed in touch from the groups and that they're getting together in person even. We often will see clusters. A bunch of people from Maine were in one group and a bunch of people from Texas were in another group. And it's just neat to see when they start creating relationships that last much longer than even the 12 weeks that we spend together. And also, for me, the most important thing is that the benefits, the health benefits, last a lifetime. And so what we're trying to create is sustainable change. Yes, get you into ketosis. Yes, get you the support you need to get more exercise and better sleep, but then to sustain that so that the trajectory of your health is benefited for the long term. And so the coaching course, what happens there is that there will be 12 live coaching sessions with me, and that will start in May. And then we're going to add on to that, of course, the book. The book will come, and with the book, you're going to get $300 in book bonus materials. So that includes a workbook that I am so proud of. The team, Kate and Khalid, there's a team of people that worked on this workbook, and it is so valuable. I think it's as valuable as the book because it guides you through a lot of the coaching. What are the reflection questions? What are the things that are relevant for me? And there's also a video summary of each chapter of the book so that you don't have to take time to sit down and read it. You can watch a 5 to 12-minute video summary and kind of get the gist of it. So if you're interested at all in joining us, please go to startreversingalzheimers.com and please go soon. We have a special going on tonight. And so you will get access immediately when you purchase, you will get access to our 11 module caregiver training course. And this is great for, even if you're not a caregiver, this is a great place to get information about how to get started. So I'll walk you through many of the pieces so that you don't have to just learn about keto, but you can get all of the puzzle pieces, decide what's easiest for you to start with, and maybe what's going to make the biggest impact if it's not keto. So you'll get instant access to that 11 module caregiver training course. You can get started right away. You'll get access to a private Facebook group, and you'll get to chat with Tyler for a one-on-one call to help you, again, get started, to know that you're starting in the right place, and to know that you have someone on your team who really gets your situation, your unique situation. And if something needs to be modified, that happens often. We regularly have someone who has some sort of constraint, some sort of special circumstance where it maybe doesn't make sense to get fully into ketosis for some reason, or it maybe doesn't, they're in a wheelchair, so exercise is going to look really different for them. Maybe they're just transitioning in or out of an assisted living facility. And so these different constraints, these different unique situations, you can discuss directly with Tyler and get wonderful answers to your questions so that you can get the benefit of this. The most exciting and the best thing about this is really joining this absolutely priceless community. I can't tell you how many people share with us the value of community. It's knowing you're not alone. In this group, you will meet accountability partners, maybe a soulmate, meetup partners for sure we have seen. And you're going to ensure that you're in a community of people who are dedicated to reversing Alzheimer's like you are. You are a pioneer in this space. You are someone on the cutting edge of the science who is not accepting that there's nothing you can do for this disease, that there are so many things that you can do, but what we need is just support making them happen. And so I just absolutely delight in the fact that the community is what adds the most value here. Of course, I hope that I add some value and I contribute in some small way to the transformations that people get. But really, I know that it's people showing up, it's people contributing, it's people answering questions and asking questions and sharing their experiences that makes this really valuable. And so I can't wait to welcome you into our community. It's such an honor and a privilege to guide it, but really it's about putting the science of how people make things happen. It's really about having that accountability, sharing with someone else that you're going to commit to this plan and to have this time set aside. That's what allows us to implement these things. That's what helps us get over that hump of, I'm going to do that someday, to actually making it happen today. So I invite you to join us, please. We can't wait to have you. It's been such an incredible journey for us. We have learned so much, and we're excited to share with you what we've learned so that you can get the benefit of it. So tonight we are offering a special price of 11. This is everything that we're offering. It's the Reverse Alzheimer's at Home course, the coaching with me, the book, the workbook, the private Facebook group, and the one-on-one health coaching call. So this is well over $5,000 in value. And many of our participants have said it's worth every single penny and more because of the transformations that they have experienced. And so right now, tonight, we're offering this for $19.97. This price will go up May 3rd. So we invite you to join us as soon as you can in this, and you will get instant access to the online health coaching course immediately. So you'll have that right away, and you will get your book right away on June 11th. We also have an option of 3 payments of $797. So if you are someone who wants to help others, if you're, we often will have someone who's a nurse or a health coach. Yes, Canadians are more than welcome to join. We have people who join from Australia. I'm so impressed by them because they either have to stay up really late or get up really early, but we've had people come from the UK, from South Africa, from Australia, from Canada, and you are more than welcome. We love having you. We've had many Canadians. And so please let us know if there's questions that we can answer. We're so delighted to have you join our community and to get the benefits that so many others have. We have many nurses and health coaches who join us, and it's because they want to learn, they want to do it for themselves, and they want to help other people. Many of them have either had a mom or an adult in their lives, a loved one who suffered with dementia, and they don't want it to happen for themselves, but they also want to be able to have that ripple effect and help others with the information that they learn. So we're always delighted to have those who are going to increase the impact of the work. I want to get into the questions and answers. So thank you for joining us. Miley has been asking, seeking tips to adhering to the Bredesen Keto Flex, including avoiding dairy and comfort foods heavy in carbohydrates while struggling to gain weight. So Miley, one thing to consider right away is just adding exogenous ketones. Sometimes if you're worried about weight, no intermittent fasting, increase the carbohydrates. And I'm curious, Miley, if you are lactose intolerant or if you know for sure that organic, especially sheep and goat dairy, those tend to be less inflammatory. If maybe you could add those, that might help you maintain the weight a little bit better. But high nutrient dense, high calorie foods, and dairy is among that. Dairy is one of those really high calorie foods that can help us to maintain weight. So adding exogenous ketones, if you aren't ready to cut those carbs back, is another way to get the benefit of ketones without fully getting into ketosis. Now, adhering to the diet, for many people, getting a meal delivery service is a helpful way to do this, especially at first. And Apollo, Dr. Bredesen's group, has partnered with Nutrition for Longevity, which is part of Walter Longo's Prolon business. So it's high quality meals, They're designed by Julie G on Dr. Bredesen's team, and they're a great way if it's hard for you to make these meals and shop and it's hard with the time, then that can be a great workaround. And then you may want to add a little bit more protein or a little bit, again, Dr. Bredesen's group is very anti-dairy. And if you're not lactose intolerant, I find it to be a practical way to get into ketosis and maintain weight. Now, if you're lactose intolerant, of course, avoid dairy. Hope Skilling was asking regarding Marama and more places opening. You mentioned something about Cleveland, the Cleveland, Ohio area. Yeah, okay, so it's not a new facility, you're right. But in Cleveland, Ohio is Nate Bregman. And Dr. Bregman is an osteopathic physician who has worked with Dr. Bredesen for a long time and is well-versed in the Bredesen protocol. He used to be at the Cleveland Clinic, but he's now in private practice, and he is a wonderful resource in that area. And so I highly recommend that you direct your friend in that direction. I hope that answers that question. From Linson7, what is the best type of doctor to see when taking multiple supplements so that they can advise on any detrimental effects between supplements interacting with one another? And I would add and interacting with medications, which can happen sometimes as well. So naturopathic doctors, of course, we were trained heavily around supplementation and what to look for in terms of interactions. And so I do recommend naturopathic doctors, but also functional medicine doctors who you can find through the IFM or the Institute for Functional Medicine. You can find functional medicine trained providers. And those often they're essentially conventionally trained providers who are looking to practice more like naturopathic doctors. So as naturopathic doctors, we kind of got that training in school. They're typically nurse practitioners, physician's assistants, medical doctors, chiropractors, and osteopaths. They'll go through the Institute for Functional Medicine program, and they learn a lot about supplements in that program. So they would also be great, well-trained providers to answer those questions about dangerous interactions between supplements and medications and in amongst supplements themselves. From Dana, what is it specifically about the keto diet that makes the difference for the benefits of brain health? Yeah, Dana, that's such a great question that I don't know that we have the exact answer for. I've heard lots of people pontificate, but I think that we're still in a hypothetical phase. We don't know for sure. We're hypothesizing, but there are certain things that we've noticed. One thing that I've seen in my clinical practice is that a dramatic change in diet seems to have benefit. Now, that might mean going from keto to plant-based. That might mean going from a standard American diet to keto. One of the biggest, most important things about the ketogenic diet is that it's non-processed. So I really think that's doing a lot of the heavy lifting, but also the metabolism, the fact that we're burning fat for fuel instead of sugar for fuel is clearly beneficial for the brain. I think that we also, when we get into the right type of ketogenic diet where we're consuming a lot of nutrient-dense foods, we are also just adding more nutrients. We're adding all of the minerals and the amino acids, the building blocks for healing and repair. Especially when we get away from the breads and carbohydrates, some of those empty calories that aren't full of nutrients, we replace those with things like leafy greens, and we eat more of that because it's not that filling, right? A bunch of leafy greens, you have to eat a lot more of that than a slice of bread to feel full. And so we often will get many, many more nutrients as we get into a ketogenic diet. And I think that that has a lot to do with it as well. So from Robin, how does one do keto on a mainly plant-based diet? My LDL was dangerously high when I tried a ketogenic diet. Yet with a plant-based diet, my LDL cholesterol is low risk, and I'm lean, exercise regularly, and have low blood pressure, so no health issues, but I want to keep my mind sharp. Yeah, the way that I recommend doing this is going back and forth, Robin. So, and what we see is that LDL cholesterol actually improves with a ketogenic diet if you stay on it long enough. So when you're burning fat for fuel, many of those cholesterol markers go down. Now, you see a ton of controversy in the literature around this, but I have seen the majority of our patients who come in with elevated lipids, whether it's LDL or ApoB, SDLDL, Lp(a), many of those markers, most of them improve, and particularly triglycerides. So high triglycerides are equated in my mind to directly to sugar or carbohydrate consumption. And we get an improvement if, again, not a bacon and cheese diet, but if we have a vegetable-rich, high fiber, high quality ketogenic diet with really high quality, if you're doing animal protein, if they're anti-inflammatory, then we see an improvement in LDL and general cholesterol markers and cardiovascular risk markers. Now, we always want to combine, as you mentioned, we want to combine the ketogenic diet with exercise, with good sleep. And what we see at Marama, where we offer and serve an organic ketogenic diet, so we see people get off of their cholesterol medications, off of their antihypertensives, off of their antidepressants, off the diabetes medications. And there have been some unfortunate, circumstances where somebody's had to move out and they have to, to be closer to family or for whatever reason, they've had to move to a conventional assisted living facility. And what we've seen is that they end up back on those medications when they don't have that great diet. So I think that there are ways to do a keto diet that's maybe not totally plant-based, but some eggs, some salmon, maybe some butter or some sheep or goat dairy. If that works for you, you don't necessarily have to be doing red meat and chicken. There are ways to do a very, very healthy ketogenic diet. Again, the most important piece is getting rid of the processed carbohydrates and really processed foods generally. We have a question from an anonymous attendee. Where can you get tested for the ApoE alleles? So you can do this through Quest or LabCorp. You can ask almost any provider and they should be able to test this for you. You can also go through places like 23andMe. If you run a 23andMe, you already have that data somewhere in that file is your ApoE status. So maybe go back and look if you've ever done one of those direct-to-consumer genetic tests. Many of them include that. You just have to do some digging through the data. But you can also ask a provider. Now, one thing that sometimes people get confused, you never have to test that again. You only test it once, your genetics will not change. So once you know your ApoE status, you can check that box, keep it handy because you might have a provider ask or want to see the results at some point. But that is a pretty easy and relatively inexpensive thing to test these days. Marilyn's asking, how do you do a keto diet on a primarily plant-based eating style? So hopefully I've answered that question. My favorite resource for vegetarian keto is Will Cole's book, Ketotarian. And if you are vegan plant-based, I don't recommend going into ketosis for more than a couple of weeks. Another anonymous attendee has a question about a mocha. I scored a nearly perfect mocha score last week. Congratulations, well done. But did a CQ online a few months back and it was low. Not sure of the number, but I think it was around 17. How can I do well on a mocha and awful on a CQ? I have short-term memory problems for sure, and I want to do recode. I can't eat nuts or eggs due to intolerance. Great question. So some of these cognitive tests are more sensitive than others. Also, the mocha, the quality of that result really is dependent on who administered it and how well trained they were. So there might be a few variables at play there, but what I would imagine would be the best next step for you is to go back to the CQ. I'm not sure if it's Brain HQ. I'm not totally familiar with CQ. I know through Recode, you would get access to CNS vital signs and Brain HQ. And then I would pick one test and stick with that so that you can use that test to basically compare apples to apples rather than one. It sounds like you found a CQ test, which I'm not familiar with. I'm familiar with the SLUMS test, the Mini Mental Status Exam, the MOCA test, and those are usually administered in a clinical setting by a tech or a provider. And then online, you can do the CNS vital signs and you can do the Brain HQ test. Brain HQ is more brain games, but they do some degree of cognitive testing in there as well. And so pick one or maybe a couple, maybe you have one with a clinician and one that you do online, and then compare apples to apples. maybe not even month over month, but every 12 weeks or so, and you'll probably see a trend in that over time. So, and then not eating nuts or eggs. I don't eat eggs, so I can relate. And I can only eat a few nuts, otherwise they bother my stomach. So I totally get it. There, many people experience this. They can't do dairy. Can they do keto? They can't do eggs. Can they do keto? Yes, if you have one or two intolerances, you can absolutely get on keto and have lots of variety. So in our keto diet guide, we have pages and pages of all of the foods that most people can eat, like 95% of people can eat and stay in ketosis. And so there's a lot of variety. Don't worry. You absolutely can get into ketosis. And remember, this isn't forever. This is for maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months, depending on your weight goals. If you don't want to lose too much weight, it'd probably be a little less. If you want to lose more weight, you might stay in ketosis longer, depending on how you're feeling. If you feel great, that's a great reason to stay in ketosis. But if you're feeling deprived, like you don't have enough variety, like you're losing too much weight, or things aren't working out quite as you hoped they would, then you don't have to stay in ketosis forever. This is not a life sentence. This is an invitation to explore and try and experiment with and see if you get that cognitive sharpness back, if you get that energy back, if you start getting better sleep. And if so, you can lean into it a little bit more. There's an anonymous attendee asking about our coaching program. Yeah, so hopefully I've given you a bunch of information about the coaching program. You are welcome to give us a call. Perhaps Tyler can get you some direct information. Tyler's here with us tonight and is my right arm when it comes to the coaching program. We would be delighted to welcome you into that program. We see so many people get amazing transformations, and we'd love to share more. Again, from Miley, further on my journey to achieve ketosis, I find it extremely challenging to feel full and finding myself spending a huge amount of time shopping and preparing satisfying meals and snacks. So, Miley, I'm curious if you are testing your ketones. Most people experience that when they are in ketosis, they actually feel satisfied and almost have to remind themselves to eat. And they'll forget meals. They do not spend a lot of time thinking about food or needing to prepare a lot. So I'm wondering if maybe you're not quite getting into ketosis. The other thing to consider, Miley, again, is the food delivery service. And maybe I hope that in the book, the recipes in there are the ones that I use myself that are quick and simple and easy. I can make them in about 20 minutes. There's not a lot to clean up. You can, of course, get more creative like our chef at Marama does, but you don't have to. There are very simple meals. And for instance, this week, I prepared on Monday night, I cooked, and I was still eating my leftovers today on Wednesday for lunch. And so I didn't have to cook every meal. You can create bigger meals. I'm sure that you've done lots of food prep. It sounds like you've spent a lot of time doing this. So, but we can talk through many of the strategies there. Happy to do that. From Andrea, I'm not able to do keto perfectly. Seems like every week I slip up just a little bit. Me too. I've never been able to get into keto according to the keto monitor. Am I still going to benefit from almost getting there? Yes, 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 yes. I'm so glad you asked this question. So what we saw in our clinical trial was, although many of our participants did get into ketosis and many of my patients get into ketosis, many of them are in the same spot you are, where we never get the ketones totally there, but they've restricted their carbohydrates, so they're not having a ton of carbs. They have a more nutrient-rich diet. They're not having processed foods, and maybe we're adding some supplements, some exercise, prioritizing sleep a little bit more. We're doing other things, and yes, they're getting better regardless of never having hit that ketone number of 1.0. So do not worry. I'd love for you to get there. So if you want to put a little bit more effort into it, there are certain things that we will recommend. At the top of the list is getting some exogenous ketones. That can be helpful. Intermittent fasting can be helpful. Sometimes exercise. Exercise is a little bit of a tricky one. Sometimes people exercise and their blood sugar goes up and it kicks them out of ketosis. And for other people, their blood sugar goes down and that helps them get into ketosis. So sometimes getting a continuous glucose monitor that you can stick on your arm and get readings in real time about where your sugar is based on not just what you eat, but stressors, how good your sleep was, exercise, all of the other variables that happen in our lives that can impact our blood sugar level. When you can get that access to that data in real time, we often learn so much that helps kind of get up over that hump of almost getting into ketosis. So I hope that that's helpful. Andrea, the continuous glucose monitor that I love is the Dexcom, which if you have a provider who's willing to send it in for you, if you just pay cash for it, because unless you have diabetes, it doesn't get covered. But if you just pay cash, you can get them from Costco with the GoodRx prescription for about $63 per continuous glucose monitor that lasts for 10 days. And that is the best $65 that you will ever spend on your health. I mean, it's so eye-opening what our blood sugar is doing when we learn in real time. And the next question is about the Keto Mojo, which I also love. But the Keto Mojo, great question. How does it work? You have to prick your finger. So you do have to get a lancet, prick your finger, and then you put a little strip in the top and you take the blood and then it gives you a reading of where your ketones are. I wish the continuous glucose monitor would also get ketones, but at this stage it doesn't. It only gets glucose. But usually those are inversely related. So when your ketones are high, your glucose is low. When your glucose is high, your ketones are low. So today I tested and I'm trying to be in ketosis, but I went to a restaurant yesterday. And although I thought I was ordering totally keto, I think there was a sauce that had some sugar in it. And sure enough, my sugar was up this morning and my ketones were down at 0.4. So I was a little bit below mild ketosis, but I am back on my diet. I'm back on my keto diet. I had a bunch of chicken and some cucumber and some yummy keto dill dip for lunch. And I'm hopeful that by tomorrow I will be back into ketosis. So Andrea, you're not alone with I slip up every week too, but it's just about getting back on it and spending the majority of your time in ketosis and celebrating when you get there and just learning from the moments when you're not. So hopefully that, Kathleen, that was a good explanation of how the Keto Mojo works. The Keto Mojo, the website for the Keto Mojo is so informative. I absolutely love it. There are recipes, there's an FAQ section. It is a very well done Keto Mojo. And so very well done website, excuse me, I was talking to me at the same time. It's a very well done website. And I think that the blood testing is by far the most accurate. Many people have tried to use the breath meters, the urine strips. Urine strips are good, but they don't give you an accurate number. They usually give you a gradient, like it'll be pink and then it'll be purple if you're in higher levels of ketosis. But the urine often will stop working after a month or so. If you've been in ketosis for a while, you won't get an accurate reading. So I try to get people to get the blood testing, even though it does require pricking your finger. When you have the continuous glucose monitor, you learn so much from that you'll know if my glucose is doing this, my ketones are doing that. You'll learn about your body, and every body is different. So you and your husband might have a different experience. You and your neighbor might have a different experience. If you're doing it at the same time, it's really fascinating to see, oh, I can eat a handful of raspberries and stay in ketosis, but you can't. But you can eat a bunch of zucchini and I can't, right? There's different things that we metabolize differently as individuals. And so there's a ton of learning. And if you come at it curious, it's just fascinating how our metabolism works and how we respond and what it feels like. So Dana has a great question. What timing on and off do I recommend for pulsing with keto? So if you have cognitive decline, then I recommend getting into ketosis continuously for 3 to 6 months. And then after 3 to 6 months, when you are alternating maybe with a paleo diet, maybe with a vegan diet, whatever makes sense for you, but not going back into a standard American cake and cookies, pasta, bread, when you're alternating back and forth with another healthy diet, I recommend being in ketosis more than you're not. So that might be 4 out of 7 days. It might mean 2.5 weeks out of the month. It might mean 2 months out of every quarter. You decide what makes sense for you. There are many personal things that come up. Maybe it's travel, maybe it's celebrations, maybe it's a holiday, whatever it is. I don't want anyone to feel like I mean, we've done keto Thanksgivings and they're amazing, but if your daughter-in-law is hosting Thanksgiving, you don't have to go and tell her to make a keto Thanksgiving, right? You can show up, have a day off where you eat what you want, and then get back into ketosis the next day or the next Monday, right? So the pulsing for somebody with cognitive decline is basically 3 to 6 months, and then more often than not. If you're in prevention mode and you have maybe some genetic risk, like if you know that you're ApoE44 or you know you're ApoE34, then I recommend being in ketosis more than not, a little bit more than 50%. Again, maybe it's 2.5 weeks per month, maybe it's Monday through Thursday, however you want to configure it based on your life and what works for you, that's fine. I don't have genetic risk. I hope sometimes I feel like I have cognitive decline because I'm overwhelmed or sleep deprived. But for the most part, I feel like I'm in prevention mode. And so I aim to get into ketosis 3 to 4 times a year for 4 to 6 weeks. And I was on vacation in March and April. I went to Japan. I ate rice and I ate mochi, everything. And I enjoyed myself and I got to experience the food of that culture. And it was part of the enjoyment of that travel. When I came back, I got into ketosis, right? So it's really about when we come back, how do we hit reset, get back on the program? Just like we do, many of us, right? You go on vacation, you're not exercising as much, you're indulging a little bit more. When you come back, how do you get back on a brain healthy program? Fully experience the event, the wedding, the holiday, the travel, but then get back on the program. That's sometimes the hardest part to do. And that's part of having community around you who can support you, remind you. Can I use urine dipsticks to measure ketones? You can. They work for a little while. They're somewhat helpful, but they're not the best. Since it's been kind of amazing because ketosis for diabetics, for dementia, for a lot of things, for pain now, for mental health, there's been so many reasons that people are now excited and interested in ketosis and using ketone meters and continuous glucose monitors, that these strips are now much less expensive than they used to be. So the strips that go into the meter, these used to be about $2 a piece when we first started recommending the ketogenic diet, like 7 years ago or so. And now they're like 50 cents a piece. So they're so much less expensive. And that was one of the constraints that we used to have. They're not free, of course, it costs money, but you don't have to test after every meal. You can test, for most people, once a day is enough. Unless you're really struggling, then we might have you test more than that to see if there's a particular meal or something that nobody's understanding that is kicking you out of ketosis. I used to have this adaptogenic matcha powder that I would have it said on the back. It had a nutrition label. It said 0 carbohydrates. But when I started using my continuous glucose monitor, it would spike my blood sugar and kick me out of ketosis. I never would have known unless I measured. So using the measuring sticks that I like to use are the Keto Mojo and the continuous glucose monitor, the Dexcom. Those are my favorites. There are other ones out there. People have successfully used them. That's why they're around, but they're not my favorite. Great question, Pat. What time is the best time of day to test? I recommend testing an hour before your second meal. Many people will test first thing in the morning when they're fasting, and they won't have anything register for ketones because they haven't consumed anything to make ketones with. There's no substrate, there's no building blocks to make ketones. So have a meal, wait, maybe if you have breakfast at 8 and then you have lunch at noon, test around 11. If you skip breakfast, if you're somebody who's intermittent fasting, just wait until, if you have your second meal at 2 or 3, test your ketones at 1 or 2. Okay, so anonymous attendee has a question. I don't eat starches, grains, etc., but I do eat fruit. How much fruit is too much if I'm not eating any starchy carbs? Many vegans also green juice and add a couple of apples or follow raw food diets, which of course include fruit. So fruit is not very helpful if you're trying to get into ketosis. I love fruit. I grew up in the tropics. Love it, right? Seasonal fruit, there's nothing better. And it's not how you get in ketosis. You can have a few blueberries. And again, we're not talking about keto for forever. So enjoy seasonal fruits and starchy veggies when you are not aiming for ketosis. But to be successful, to reach a ketogenic state where you're metabolizing fat instead of sugar, we have to restrict carbohydrates, including the sugars, fructose, that comes in fruit. So I'm not vilifying fruit by any stretch. I think there are fruit anthocyanidins, like especially berries, dark berries, are so full of great nutrients. And you're not going to get into ketosis if you eat too many of them. So they don't work together. Where do we get exogenous ketones? Mary, hopefully that Tyler has put in the chat the exogenous ketones that we recommend. And Kathy has the same question. I must have been mentioning exogenous ketones at 4:50. I'm glad everybody's excited because they are a great way to get those ketone levels up. And there's a few different products out there, but I really thank you, Tyler, for popping that in there. And sometimes they're changing. They don't always taste great, but you can get them in capsules. You can get them in powders. Some people love the taste. I don't prefer it, but they do tend to be very helpful in terms of getting those ketone numbers up and getting you that fuel so that your brain can have that extra energy. Are there any problems associated with being in keto? I know someone that was on keto and developed kidney issues as per her doc. What is your finding? So that's a great point, Peace, and thank you for bringing it up. So there are some considerations. If you have high cholesterol, caution. I don't want to convince anyone to go into ketosis and they're eating all bacon and cheese. That is not the idea. Kidney issues, we don't see that too often. As long as you're getting a ton of greens, you're hydrating, you're getting plenty of minerals. If you have a kidney issue, if you already have stage 3 chronic kidney disease, or if you have something going on, you may want to restrict protein. And protein, we're usually restricting carbohydrates, having plenty of fat, plenty of protein, plenty of green veggies. And if you're restricting carbohydrates and restricting protein, you want to work with a health coach or a provider to make sure that you're getting plenty of nutrients, that we're not restricting too much. The biggest caution I suggest, I really worry about someone who has struggled with an eating disorder, because restricting carbohydrates, restricting a macro can sometimes re-trigger just restrictive eating in general. And so I think it's important that if you've ever had an eating disorder, if you've ever struggled with that you're working really closely with a provider and you're aware that can happen when we kind of start to go down this path. So I require that anybody who's struggled with an eating disorder before work with a provider one-on-one to make sure that that's not re-triggered. Oxalates can come up. So if you're eating a ton of spinach, chia, and almond, which are all great for a ketogenic diet, but if you start eating a lot of those things, you can end up with kidney stones, calcium oxalate stones. It can also cause muscle pain and joint pain. So we usually test urine to make sure that that's not going on. And there's a few different ways to mitigate that. So yeah, I recommend working with a doctor, especially if you know that you have other issues, heart disease, kidney issues, cholesterol. Many people ask, what if I've had my gallbladder out? Can I still do this? You absolutely can. There are ways to get around, even having smaller meals. So you're not having really bolus doses of fat all at once, but you're having smaller amounts and then using ox bile or other enzymes to help you break it down. So there's a bunch of things to consider as you go in the direction of the ketogenic diet, but it's generally safe, particularly if you're eating a great healthy keto. I don't know much about keto. What are the rules? Kathy Marshall, I hope that you have access to our keto diet guide. There's a PDF. It's an 8 or 9 page PDF that has all the rules, all the foods to eat. We don't focus too much on the ones not to eat, but you are restricting your carbs. We usually want to get carbs below 50 for sure, and sometimes below 30 grams. Thank you, Tyler. I just saw that she shared that PDF again in the chat so that you can download it right away. The rules are carb restriction, but lots of greens, lots of minerals, lots of hydration, moving, having a bowel movement every day. That's one of our rules. And then there's a ton of support so that you can fully grasp how do we move from burning sugar, carbohydrates, and glucose to burning fat for fuel. The biggest thing is carb restriction. From Dawn, can I review this again or does it go away? You are going to get the recording of this just by signing up. You will get an email that has the recording so that you can watch this at any time and at your leisure. So hopefully that is helpful. Is Keto Flex 123 by Nutrition for Longevity any good, at least for the first few weeks? Barbara, absolutely. Could that be used as a guide for self-prepared meals? Absolutely. I think that the Nutrition for Longevity, that has been really, really, really well formulated. And they have, they had version 1, we saw that go out and there was some feedback. And so they reformulated it. They got more variety in there. They have done such a great job. And it's really fun to get those boxes and they're delicious. They're great meals, especially for the first few weeks. I think it's a great way to transition, kind of add that to your exogenous ketones. And that's the easiest way I've seen people get into ketosis, especially the first time. From Marguerite, are there any plans for a keto Marama cookbook? We have played with that idea for a long time. We're hoping if this book is successful, then maybe we'll get a follow-up deal and we will be able to get the Marama cookbook out to you. That is the plan. But don't forget, there are 15 solid, easy to make recipes in this book. And so that's a great place to start. And then Molly Devine's book and Will Cole's cookbooks, both of those are fantastic as well. From Nigel, I'm a type 1 diabetic and have lost weight. I'm down to 59 kilos. I can't afford to lose any more weight and need to use glucose when I get low blood sugar. What do you suggest as to how I can implement keto safely in order to keep my sugar levels steady but not put weight on? Great question, Nigel. So it's interesting. I think that there's probably a connection. I don't quote me on this, but I've seen a lot of type 1 diabetics that suffer with dementia later on. And I think that the spikes and drops and spikes and drops, I don't know how long you've had type 1 diabetes for, but my mother-in-law, for instance, has had type 1 diabetes for the past 50 years and now is struggling with dementia. And I suspect that irregularity, she's had so many highs and so many lows over the years, that has contributed to inflammation in her brain. Now, I hope that what you're using at this point is a continuous glucose monitor and maybe even an insulin pump so that you can keep your sugar levels pretty stable. I also recommend high fat, high protein, and then I hope the fat and protein can help you to actually gain weight. One of the things we see as people age as well, part of the reason they have trouble keeping weight on or putting weight on is because they're not digesting and absorbing as well as they used to. You're not making as much hydrochloric acid or as many pancreatic enzymes. And so you might consider adding some digestive enzymes. We love the ones from Pure Encapsulations, Digestive Enzymes Ultra with HCl. So consider that's something I learned from our coaching groups is we've had several people who say that they've started to put weight on after adding digestive enzymes. So that is one of my recommendations, and hopefully you're on you're using a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, and an insulin pump. And fat and protein is one of the best ways to keep your blood sugar stable. I would make sure what you might want to do is add exogenous ketones, Nigel, because you can't afford to lose any more weight. So you don't have to, you can still have very calorie dense meals. Don't restrict your carbohydrates, just add the ketones to get started and see how that goes. Are exogenous ketones helpful from Dale Z? Yes, yes, for many, many, many people. My sister is on chemo and immunotherapy. She's immunocompromised. Is a ketogenic diet, can that help to support her immunity? Sophia, that's a great question. Cancer is not my wheelhouse. I do know what comes up for me is that cancer loves sugar. It feeds on sugar. So although I don't recommend probably her getting into ketosis because I wouldn't want her to lose any weight, I would highly recommend avoiding any processed foods and limiting any sugar to just starchy veggies and seasonal fruits and all organic. When they do PET scans looking for cancer, they use radioactive glucose because what identifies cancer is how much glucose it's taking up. Glucose literally feeds cancer. So the more that you can reduce that, maybe not getting fully into ketosis, but not having an abundant amount, right? Not eating ice cream and stuff like that, cakes and cookies, I think the better off you are in terms of someone with cancer. You also want an anti-inflammatory diet. So maybe looking at something like a Mediterranean diet for her. And again, reducing or eliminating completely any processed foods. I'm very confused that you don't recommend intermittent fasting since Bredesen highly recommends 12 to 16 hours of fasting. Great question. So I don't recommend intermittent fasting. We usually do about 15 hours from 8 p.m. or excuse me, from 5 p.m. to 8 a.m. So that is, I guess, an intermittent fast because some people do eat until like 8 p.m., 9 p.m., and then they're eating again at 7 a.m. I wouldn't recommend any less than 12. Certainly you want 12 hours of intermittent fasting, but some people are doing 16 and 18 hours of intermittent fasting. They might eat at 5 and then not again until noon the next day or 11 the next day, and they're only having an eating window of 6 hours, and they might have only 2 meals. That's great if you want to lose weight because you probably have less calories. But if you are concerned about frailty or weight loss, I do not recommend that. So it really depends on the person. And I'm sorry if I wasn't super clear about that. But intermittent fasting can be a wonderful tool, particularly if you're struggling to get into ketosis and weight loss is one of your goals. I intermittent fast. I don't eat my first meal until 11 or 12, and I tend to finish my last meal. I'm trying to finish before 7. So I have an eating window of about 7 or 8 hours, and it's more of a 15, 16-hour fast. But that's not appropriate for everyone, particularly if we're worried about weight loss and frailty. I can't get into ketosis without fasting from Mary. We see this commonly. Yep. So it does help if you're struggling to get into ketosis to do intermittent fasting. Regarding fish oils from Shannon Douglas in New Zealand. Oh, so great to have you joining us. Omega-3s, does flax oil work as well as fish oil? So unfortunately, no. Most people can convert flax oil into the DHA and EPA, but not everyone. And it does require work to make those conversions biochemically. I recommend most people just supplement with omega-3s and eat those good cold water fish, your salmon, wild-caught salmon, sardines, anchovies, mackerel, and herring. Those are the best ways to get good omegas. And krill oil might be another way, but there's not a great vegan omega. You can get some good fats from flax, don't get me wrong, but most people need more than that. So yeah, that's what I recommend. Can I comment on goat whey and camel milk, please? Yeah, I'm a fan of the different milks. And especially if you have, A2 milk is one of the ones. I'm not a huge milk fan, actually. I shouldn't say that. For the most part, I goat might be a good one. Camel might be better. Individuals respond differently to these. I like cheese because some of the lactose is taken out of it. If you're going to do milk, I recommend actually cream. Get the fat. Lactose is glucose. It's half sugar and half galactose. Many people are sensitive to it, and there's a lot of it in milk. And I'm never a fan of like skim milk or any of those, even 2%. Only full fat, the least processed possible. And goat whey and camel milk, I mean, give it a shot. I don't have a lot of experience, so I'm not opposed to it, but I just don't know that much about it. I am a fan of goat and sheep cheeses. Those seem to be really good, and they're consumed in some of those areas, like in Sardinia, in those blue zones where people live a lot longer. There are goat and sheep cheeses that are consumed, and they seem to be less inflammatory than and then cow dairy. Is coaching online? Yes, all the coaching is online. You can join us from anywhere in the world, including Colombia, which actually the time zone is not that bad there. From Leslie, can I recommend an app to count carbs and track ketosis levels, assuming you're using a keto meter? So the Keto Mojo has an app that you can use, and a lot of people like those. Also, the Chronometer is another one that many people like. I personally, who I am, I'm not a carb counter. I don't tend to count things. I just, it's not my style, and I don't tend to ask other people to count things. I know that some people really like to do that. Tyler, maybe you have a good one that you can recommend, because it's just not my style. I like people to kind of feel like they don't have to do that. They don't have to be so fastidious, that they can enjoy. But a lot of people love Chronometer. I see many people adding that to the chat, so I hope that that's helpful, Leslie. Please comment on MCT oil. We love it. It's one of the first things that I recommend often in the coaching program, is just add coconut or MCT oil. Now, the only thing is it can cause diarrhea if you add too much too fast. So start with a half a tablespoon once. And then when you start bumping that up, you might do a half a tablespoon at breakfast and a half a tablespoon at dinner, and then a full tablespoon at breakfast and a full tablespoon at dinner, and then a full tablespoon at lunch. Go up slowly to make sure that your gut can tolerate it. Sometimes adding a lot of oil all at once is a little bit rough on the GI tract, but many people will notice within days that they feel cognitively better. And the reason is coconut oil has a lot of MCT in it, and MCT oil becomes ketones very easily. It's basically the thing that we can consume that's not ketones, that's the closest to it. And so it's the most likely to turn into ketones that our brain can use as fuel. And Dr. Mary Newport has published extensively on this. You may have heard of her because she supported her husband, and he had a really miraculous kind of turnaround just from adding coconut oil. And she speaks at conferences. She spoke on my summit. She's become a dear friend, and she's just absolutely lovely and an absolute expert. I saw someone ask a really great question about coconut and MCT and ApoE44. There's some controversy amongst the experts. So when you talk to Dr. Bredesen, Dr. Gundry, they're concerned that people with ApoE44 don't respond as well, because it changes. ApoE4 is about how you metabolize lipids, and it does change how you metabolize fats. And so they are concerned that the medium chain triglycerides and the fats found in coconut oil are not metabolized as well by people with ApoE4, and it might increase their cardiovascular risk. Mary Newport completely disagrees. She says there's no literature that supports that conclusion. And what I've seen clinically is that people with ApoE44 who get on a ketogenic diet and consume coconut oil and MCT, their lipids improve. Now, that's with exercise, it's with supplementation, it's with other things, including bioidentical hormone replacement, which we've seen improve lipids. So It's not in isolation, just adding a bunch of coconut oil. But what I recommend is if you're ApoE44 positive, you work with a provider and check your labs regularly. So instead of saying, oh, everybody with ApoE44 can't have coconut, what I say is try it, see what happens, see what your experience is. You're not going to cause irreparable damage in 3 months. So try on a ketogenic diet with coconut and then test your lipids before and after and see what happens. And then make a change and see what happens over the next 3 months. It's amazing when you can partner with a provider who is willing to run all those labs and who is excited to look at it with you and excited to kind of dig into like what's going on and what are the changes that you're making and what are the benefits or the risks. And you can always change course. So I hope that I don't want anyone to be afraid of this diet because they're ApoE4 positive or afraid of coconut. I don't think it's bad for you. That's where I'm on Mary Newport's side at this point. Is the coaching program only for those already diagnosed with Alzheimer's, or is it also for those of us who hope to avoid it? What a great question, Hope. Thank you for asking. It's for people who are in prevention mode, they're caring for someone else, or they're already starting to notice those early signs. So absolutely, we get people across the entire spectrum, and it's really fun to have everybody present because they share their experiences. And the best part is seeing people feel better, feeling cognitively optimized, and really their health optimized generally. It's such a privilege for me to be part of it. I take a progesterone every night at 8 p.m. with food. How can I do this and still do intermittent fasting with 13 hours without food? Great question, Kay. I'm curious if you need to have the progesterone with food or if you could maybe skip that. Okay, so we have come to 6 o'clock Pacific time. There are still hundreds of you here. I'm so I'm so humbled. Thank you, thank you, thank you for showing up, for being here, for spending the time, for being at the cutting edge of all of this, for being pioneers who are interested in optimizing brain health. There are many questions that I have not gotten to answer, and we will be back next week. So please put those questions in the Q&A at the very beginning, and I will just start at the top. I'm happy to answer keto questions. Like I said, it's where we get the most questions. It's what there are the most questions about, the most controversy. But I really invite you to give it a try. See what your experience is. I want everyone to feel rested in the morning, to feel like they have plenty of energy. I want them to feel their brain healing. I want them to feel like they can find that word they're looking for. I want you to have that next birthday, that next anniversary, and feel fully present. And I want you to know that you're on track for taking care of your health and that of your loved ones. So thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the first step of getting the information. We are here to help you implement. And I hope that tonight we've inspired you to make better choices for your brain health that you can start today. I'll look forward to seeing you next week. Again, thank you so much for being here. Good night.